The Chronicles of Myrtana Archolos is a 2021 Gothic 2 full conversion mod developed by the Chronicles of Myrtana team. Now, those of you who are unfamiliar with the Gothic franchise might be asking yourselves, why is Unk reviewing a mod instead of an actual game? Well, thing is, Archolos is so high quality, so professionally made, that it may as well be an official title. Archolos is so good that calling it a mod severely downplays the lengths the devs went in order to improve on the original Gothic experience. Professional voice acting, about 100 hours worth of quests and content, a new crafting system, over 200 random events, an original story that takes place on a new map several years before the events of the first Gothic game and fits seamlessly into the continuity of the Gothic universe, a wide variety of biomes with tons of hidden loot and dangerous creatures, and so many other things both big and small that I wish I could cram into this intro, but then I'd have to face the fact that I could have made this video much shorter. Archolos is, and sorry for the hyperbole, the closest thing I, and probably many other people, will get to the experience of being 13 and playing Gothic for the first time. Oh, and it's free. No strings attached. Well, you obviously have to own Gothic 2 to play Archolos, but these days it often goes on sale for the price of a, I don't know, a kebab. Speaking of which, can you play Archolos and ignore Gothic 1 and 2? I mean, you can, but you shouldn't. Experiencing the original game's design quirks and jank will make the improvements and new gameplay systems introduced by Archolos hit so much harder. Let me put it this way, you have to experience the convoluted and ridiculously min-maxy progression system introduced by Gothic 2's Night of the Raven expansion firsthand to truly appreciate the quality of life changes brought by Archolos. Plus, you can point your finger at the screen like Leo DiCaprio whenever an event or character from Gothic 1 and 2 is mentioned in Archolos. And if I know anything about anything, catching references, callbacks and connections across media is a quintessential part of the human experience. Don't believe me? Just ask my friends how excited I get during watch parties when I spot an actor from The Wire in an unrelated piece of media. Actually, don't do that. So let's cut to the chase and dive straight into it. Before we start, I have a semi-active Blue Sky and a Patreon where you can support the channel with real-life money. I also have that channel membership thingy if you know, want other ways to support my work. Let's go!
Na Inosa, mój mąż miał rację. Ta zupa jest niejadalna.
The Chronicles of Myrtana Archolos takes place about 10 years before the events of Gothic 1. The story centers around the island of Archolos, a semi-autonomous region of the Kingdom of Myrtana, in the aftermath of a disastrous defeat of the royal fleet. The Cliff Notes version of the events is that the Kingdom of Myrtana is fighting a losing war against the orcs. Desperate to stop, or at least to contain the orc invasion, King Robar confiscates the ship of the Archolos merchant guild to transport his troops to the front line, and increases the number of criminals sent to work in the penal colony on the island of Corinus, known as the Valley of Mines. Meanwhile, the island of Archolos, rich, prosperous, and somewhat insulated from the effects of the war, is flooded with refugees from the mainland and surrounding islands looking to escape the orc invasion and the growing economic crisis. One of those many refugees is you, Marvin, the player character, and your deadbeat but well-meaning older brother, Jorn. And yes, your character is named after Marvin mode in Gothic 1, 2, and 3. Not that I ever used it to activate cheats or anything like that. That would be outrageous. I am nothing but an honest and law-abiding man. Marvin and Jorn's journey gets off to a bad start when the captain of the smuggling ship that was supposed to transport them from their home island of Lordran to Archolos decides to maroon his passengers near the coast of Archolos. Many passengers lose their lives, but luckily Marvin, Jorn and a group of survivors land a short distance from the idyllic village of Silbach, where coincidentally their uncle Kurt lives. Unfortunately, Marvin's idiot brother, who somehow concludes that it would be a great idea to venture into the woods alone, unarmed, unequipped and at night, suffers a life-threatening bloodfly sting. Sometime later, just as Marvin had started building a rapport with the wary villagers and found a cure for the bloodfly sting, Jorn is kidnapped by two strangers and presumably taken to the city of Archolos. This event kicks off the main quest of the game: find out what happened to Jorn and save him. A task which also serves as an excuse for the game to send a player all over the map and put them into contact with the island's major players. Now, compared to the original game's more fantastical premises, escaping a prison colony surrounded by an impenetrable magical barrier barrier and slaying a mighty dragon respectively, Archolos' premise is decisively mundane. Everything you do in this game, dealing with factions, climbing the social ladder, partaking in the island's tumultuous political landscape, serves the ultimate goal of finding and saving your brother. That's it. There's no ancient, mysterious threat revealed in the third act that only Marvin can handle. The stakes are obviously much lower this time around. Not that saving a loved one from certain death is a trivial matter, but I don't think it's a stretch to say that it's lower in the hierarchy of cataclysmic phenomena than saving the world from a Lovecraftian entity or an army of dragons. If you think I'm mocking Archolos, well, I'm not. God knows I've been preventing every variation of world-shattering events in RPGs to last me 3 lifetimes. I welcome Archolos' more grounded take on the Gothic universe. I love it even. Now don't get me wrong, I like my dragon-slaying chosen ones as much as the next person, but it's rare to see a fantasy story that has the balls to stay consistently grounded from start to finish and not resort to, well, the main character is not special but type of cop-outs. To say that Archolos' story feels refreshing and relatable, especially as someone from this part of the world, would be an understatement. I think Archolos, together with Disco Elysium and to some extent The Witcher 3, especially the quest with Geralt's inheritance and the resulting bureaucratic nightmare, those who know, is one of the few games that gets it. Archolos is so Eastern European coded that I often found myself muttering bro and smiling ear to ear. I love that Marvin is just a dude. A very competent but comically over his head regular dude who's just trying to get by. A nearly literal fish out of the water. I love how Marvin works his way up in the world only to become yet another cog in the local political machine. I love that Marvin spends so much time and energy on a deadbeat relative that doesn't really deserve all that effort, but he still does it because, well, Jorn's his brother, what the fuck else is he gonna do? Let Jorn be carved off for organs in some back alley clinic?
W tej chwili próbuję ugotować pyszną potrawkę z dzika z warzywami, ale gotowanie to prawdziwa sztuka, a jak każda inna wymaga ona cierpliwości, precyzji i... Chwila. Czujesz to? O nie. Nie!
Presentation-wise, Archolos looks, sounds and feels almost identical to Gothic 2, from the blocky character design, immersive sound cues like the rustling of leaves in the woods, to the lovable jank without which Gothic wouldn't be, well, Gothic. However, as soon as you reach Silbach, the first major settlement in the game, and venture into the denser woods north of the village, it becomes very apparent that the engine is stretched to its absolute limits. Not only is there a level of detail that wasn't present in Gothic 2, there's also a density of detail and diversity of biomes that is just astonishing to see rendered in this engine. Glades, hills, dense woods, rocky areas, rivers, beaches, all flowing seamlessly into each other with no loading screens or noticeable technical issues. There are both old and new assets used, and I'm pretty sure the weather effects have been tinkered with to some degree. The scale becomes even crazier once you get to Archolos. To say this place is huge would be an understatement. It absolutely dwarfs Gothic 2's Korenis in size, design and complexity. I couldn't find any numbers, but I'm pretty sure Archolos' Old Town is almost as big as Korenis' Harbor District. I also have no idea how they crammed so many characters in one space without causing the engine to YouTube itself, but I guess that's why I'm not a developer. Another thing that struck me was just how diverse and creative the environments are. There was always something interesting to see. A mighty fortress dwarfing the surroundings, a lush, vibrant vineyard, a faraway lighthouse just begging you to explore it and uncover its secrets. This deep valley where you go down and down until you notice the beautiful waterfall flowing towards its bottom, creepy cemeteries with zombies and skeletons, a big-ass mine with workers tolling day and night, a woodcutter's camp not 10 steps away from a charcoal burner's camp. Then there's the weirder stuff, like the beach ship turned pirate in, and then you realize, oh shit, wait a second, that's one of the Myrtanan ships that was sunk by the orcs. And how could I forget about the bathhouse that gave me flashbacks to Eastern Promises 2007? You know which scene I'm talking about. Some quests may put you through an excessive, and I mean excessive amount of backtracking, sure, but at least there's always something interesting to see. Hell, I was still discovering new stuff 8 80 hours into my playthrough. Given the density of detail in Archolos, I wouldn't be surprised if someone told me it took 10 playthroughs to see absolutely everything there is to see. A big difference between Archolos and Gothic 2 in terms of presentation is that Archolos experiments with some interesting camera angles during certain in-engine cutscenes. I don't think Gothic 2 goes beyond the standard shot reverse shot, not that it needed to, so seeing the occasional camera pan was a welcome surprise. It really elevated and reinforced the "oh, now the shit has actually hit the fan" feeling of some of the major story moments. Like in chapter 3 when there's a failed assassination attempt on a powerful Archolos politician and let's call him businessman, and the city immediately goes into lockdown to quote-unquote keep the flow of refugees in check. Because of course the refugees were blamed for the attempted assassination of a powerful man whose laundry list of controversies would make a Wikipedia editor blush, but that's beside the point. Believe it or not, the craziest part of Archolos' presentation is not the technical wizardry that the team pulled to create these game spaces that are orders of magnitude larger than what you would see in Gothic 2, nor is it the absolutely breathtaking landscapes and the sheer variety of stuff to see. No, it's the soundtrack. It features over 30 tracks composed specifically for this project and were, get this, recorded with a live orchestra. Now, alongside the original pieces, the soundtrack does include some new interpretations of Kai Rosenkranz's music from the entire Gothic trilogy, but they're so freaking good and fit the game so well that they might as well be original compositions. I felt freaking goosebumps when I first heard the interpretation of the Corinnes Harbor theme from Gothic 2. It took me back to 2006 when I first descended through the Corinnes slums and came out in the Corinnes Harbor. Then there's the city's theme, the various tracks that play in the overworld, and it's okay, I'll shut up, let's listen to some snippets.
Trzeba uważać, co się komu mówi. To przecież nic nowego.
The last thing to note here is the voiceover. From what I can tell and what channel friend Mr. Shtoski aka Primordial Chronicles has told me, the voice acting is pretty professionally done. Marvin especially has this boyish charm with a subtle edge hinting at a possibly criminally adjacent past. He ran with some shady people back home but never did anything beyond stealing the odd trinket, but if you need something done, a piece of work as they say, he might know a guy type of criminal past. Now the thing about the voiceover, it's in Polish. There's no English voiceover with no plans to include one in the future, probably because the cost of this already free mod would fucking balloon. And you know what? I hope they stick to that. Archolos wouldn't be Archolos without a Polish voiceover, it lends a certain charm to it. Plus, after 100 hours of Archolos, I can confidently state that I am 100% fluent in Polski. There's something, I don't know, very satisfying about nauka nowego języka z gry wideo. I don't know how it happened, it's not like I intentionally set out to do it, it's just jestem ciekawą osobą. Wait a second, I think it's taking over. Oh no. Pomocy! Nie mogę przestać!
Cholera!
In terms of world design and exploration, Archolos is on par if not even better at times than the original Gothic games. Look, I realize this isn't a fair thing to say given that Archolos has the advantage of over 2 decades of feedback and hindsight, but still there's no escaping the fact that Archolos has slightly ruined the original Gothic games for me. Just a bit. Just a little bit, a tiny bit. Let me explain. Let's start with world building stuff. So, just in case you're unfamiliar with the original Gothic games, Gothic is known for its relatively realistic and grounded approach to fantasy. You're a clueless nobody who's thrown into an unforgiving, highly transactional world, and you have to sort of figure out how things work on your own and slowly worm yourself into the existing power structures, and also gain enough influence and trust to become a power player yourself. I know that's a gross oversimplification, but that's basically how things work. What's truly special about Gothic, and by extension Archolos, is that everything from the combat mechanics to the world design and the side quests and exploration elements work in tandem to support this theme of a nobody struggling against a world that is out to beat, cheat, scam and abuse them with every opportunity. And if someone is not trying to outright fuck with you, they're at best indifferent towards you. As a result, the world feels immersive in a way that's difficult to describe without talking about the world as a whole. So let's do just that. Archolos is an island region situated to the east of mainland Myrtana and northeast of the island of Corinnes. Once upon a time, Archolos was ruled by the Wolf Sons, the native people of the island. Things were chill until Wolfjak, the first known ruler of the Wolf Sons, divided the island between his 3 sons. The first son got the mighty city of Archolos, the second got the village of Silbach in the southern region, and the third was to rule over Vardhal and the Wolf's Den, the family stronghold. But the brothers started bickering over who should rule over what, and soon enough a civil war broke out. The king of Myrtana saw an opportunity in the brothers' feud, so he defeated 2 of the brothers in battle, installed the other as a vassal of the kingdom of Myrtana, and the rest is history. As Myrtanans settled the island, the native people gradually abandoned more and more land to the colonists until only the area of the Wolf's Den remained inhabited by them. By the start of the game, Archolos is thriving, at least compared to the rest of the kingdom, which is slowly crumbling under the pressure of the orcish onslaught. Archolos has a flourishing local economy, a thriving wine and beer making industry, a sprawling network of craftsmen producing valuable tools and products, fertile soil, coal, iron and silver mines, a huge metropolis that gives even the likes of Corinnes a run for its money, and enough political clout to tell the king to go fuck himself. Archolos really has the best of all worlds, geographically isolated enough from the mainland for some degree of self-ruling to make sense, but close enough to the center of power to tap into it when it suits its interests. This culture of self-reliance and resilience is why the inhabitants of the island consider themselves Archolosians first and Myrtanans second. They want nothing to do with the mainland, unless there's shit to be sold, because after all, they do make the best damn wine in the kingdom. This is also why they couldn't give less of a shit about the orcish invasion. They're way out here in the middle of nowhere doing their own thing. Why would the orcs invade them? In fact, when Marvin informs a powerful landowner and the governor himself that there are orc scouts roaming the countryside, they straight up tell him to cut it with the nonsense and shut his bitch ass mouth. Well, not in those exact words, but you get the idea. Now, why did I waste so much time with background information? Because that background is crucial to fully understanding just how well crafted and detailed this world is, from item placement, quest locations to, and I shit you not, the supply chain supporting the local economy. Take a blacksmith, right? A blacksmith needs at a minimum a forge, an anvil, tools, coal, steel and iron bars. What if I told you the entire supply chain needed for a blacksmith to function exists in the game? Well, you don't literally see it in motion, it's not that kind of game, but it's there, it exists. The Merchants Guild operates the mines on Archolos. That iron is mined by their network of contractors and distributed to guild-affiliated blacksmiths around Archolos. A smithy needs charcoal, but to make charcoal you need hardwood. So it makes sense that the guild has set up a woodcutter's camp and a charcoal burning camp right next to each other on the island. Rare crafting ingredients needed for the production of master weapons, like say Shadow Beast hides or work skins are supplied by guild-affiliated hunters who are in turn supported by guild trackers who map out beast populations. Cause you don't want hunters stumbling into works where there are supposed to be only a few measly scavengers, right? But how do hunters, craftsmen, innkeepers and the like end up working with the guild in the first place? Well, it just so happens that the guild has an outreach program designed specifically to recruit craftsmen and negotiate contracts. In fact, there's a quest where you do exactly that. How about, say, the fishing industry? Well, you can talk with a fisherman that has a monopoly on the river outside the city. And on it goes. What I've just shown you is but a tiny slice of Archolos' excellent world building. There are layers upon layers of this stuff that you and Marvin get to gradually peel off together as you're learning the ropes. Now that we've laid the, or rather a, foundation, it's time to talk about how you, Marvin, fit into all of this. And the simple answer is that, well, you don't fit in that much at all. If I were to choose the one distinguishing feature between Gothic and Archolos, gun to my head, it would be that if in Gothic you started as a nobody and became somebody, in Archolos you start as a nobody and stay a nobody. No matter how much you ingratiate yourself with the locals, you're still ultimately an outsider and everybody will view you with suspicion. There are always questions regarding your true intentions. Why is this refugee always so helpful? Why is he asking so many stupid questions? Is he dense or something? Why the hell was he allowed so quickly into the city's exclusive old town, and more to the point, how the fuck was he able to afford a house there? The constant barrage of backhanded insults and microaggressions made me think twice before choosing a dialogue option. It also immersed me into Marvin's role to a degree that few games manage to. Even 100 hours into the game, when I was Gothic mugging everybody on the island, I was still walking on eggshells around some people because deep down, I still felt like the scared scrawny refugee who was barely eking out a living by cleaning floors in Selbach. In fact, Marvin gets so much shit from the locals that at one point he's shocked when a villager shows a semblance of kindness to him. Funnily enough, a hunter later recounts how he was treated just as badly when he first arrived in Selbach. This is another thing I love about Archolos, how real these people feel. They have thoughts and opinions and feelings about all sorts of stuff that they may or may not be open to share with you. Some are frustrated with their jobs, while others find a sense of purpose in doing their part for the community. They have beef with each other and they won't hesitate to involve you in their petty squabbles. There's a very funny quest in the city involving Frida the hunter and Alice, an antiques merchant. They have some beef going back years, the origin of which Frida is obviously unwilling to share with you because, you know, you two just met, like why would she tell you? Now I know what you're thinking. This is one of those typical help two people compromise and patch things up quests, where the good ending is hidden behind some tidbit of information offhandedly revealed by some random NPC. So it was just all a misunderstanding, right? Like the X overhears a snippet of conversation that sounds worse than it actually is with no prior context, sitcom type of misunderstanding, right? Right? Nah, it's not that kind of quest. And it's not that kind of game either. See, Alice keeps an extremely illegal and not to mention dangerous pet in her shop. A caged harpy. Okay, so what? Frida asks you to like snitch Alice to the guards? Again, no. Your job is to simply release the caged harpy and report back to Frida for your reward. That's it. No big reveal, no grand resolution, just two people way past the point of reconciliation, captive in a never-ending cycle of pettiness. This quest might not seem like much at first glance, and the devs might not have thought about it too deeply, but to me, it perfectly encapsulates the essence of the game. For one, the game's depiction of Frida and Alice's relationship is spot on. People rarely, if ever, bury the hatchet after some piece of information that fundamentally recontextualizes their beef is suddenly revealed. I hate when games and movies do that. People simply don't function like that. It takes a lot of sustained effort and compromise from both sides to reach that point. Most of us are busy and stressed and stretched thin, so it's easier to stick to old grudges and not give them too much thought. So I commend the Archolos team for, to quote Logan Ninefingers, being realistic about these things. And secondly, the quest is but one of many instances where Marvin has to do someone else's dirty work to get his foot in the door, as Frida is an influential citizen and her recommendation will carry a lot of weight in Marvin's citizenship application. Futile as Marvin's efforts to carve a little corner for himself in this world may be, that didn't stop me from squeezing every bit of juice that this world has to offer. And boy, what a masterfully crafted world this is. An absolute pure joy to explore and uncover. You know you're in for something special when you're excited for an idyllic little fantasy village in the middle of the woods. Part of that is because Archolos follows the old Gothic tradition of handcrafted environments that feel organic, and I apologize for using this word again, immersive. I'm just gonna call it the Gothic school of world design. The kind of design that constantly nudges you to push just a little further, even if you're on death's door and you've wasted your entire supply of provisions and healing items on that one fucking warg, or climb a steep mountainside, or dive into random ponds, or push through a dark thicket of woods despite the big danger signs littering the place. You never know what you'll get, or if the loot will even be worth the effort, but you'll still push on regardless. Slaying a golem with only an apple and 2 measly arrows to show for it will not make you feel less of a pioneer. And that curiosity that the game instills just by virtue of its handcrafted and thought out environments made for some of the best and often hilarious moments. 2 specific stories come to mind. The first involved the sword guarded by a group of nasty goblin warriors on top of a hill. I struggled for the better part of an hour to kill them and obtain the sword legitimately, only to suffer a grisly end, again and again. And then I thought, why don't I just push through the goblins and steal it? And I did just that, except that as soon as the goblins rushed me, I panicked and I jumped into a waterfall. I escaped with no scratches and a cool sword to show for it. I might have been too low level to use it, but hey, that's what the infinite inventory is for. The second story is even stupider than that. I was exploring around the Archolos guild mine when I spotted a slope to my left. It's almost impossible to notice unless you're deliberately looking for hidden paths, like I had been conditioned by these freaking Piranha Bytes games for the last 20 years. Anyways, this long slope led to a gorgeous valley with a waterfall flowing into it. The area felt suspiciously devoid of powerful mobs, until I was blindsided by a troll. Mind you, I am still firmly in the mid-game, so tackling a troll head-on is out of the question, but I really wanted its loot. So, in a fit of genius, I used the shrink scroll and beat the troll senseless until it died. A certified Gothic moment for sure. An idyllic stroll through nature turned into a cartoon. Beyond the more spectacular moments, there's a lot of joy to be found in discovering the smaller details scattered around the world. Everything has been carefully and thoughtfully placed, and there's a story behind even the measliest of loot if you dig deeply enough. An abandoned shack off the beaten path just waiting to be looted. A quiver of arrows leaning against a tree stump, implying a hunting trip gone wrong. A great addition to Archolos is the scripted events. For example, you'll sometimes see village guards fending off beasts. The beasts in turn have specific behaviors. Some will warn you before attacking, while others will pounce on you without hesitation. There's an entire layer of storytelling delivered both through environmental storytelling and more conventional mediums, like books and journals and notes left behind by characters. You can find out how the city was constructed and how and why it became an economic powerhouse, despite its geographic isolation from the mainland. How the city guard in Archolos developed a distinct culture from its counterpart in Korenis in the mainland. There are books with detailed entries about every single beast describing their behavior, origin, anatomy, weaknesses, and so on. Of course, all of this background content is entirely optional. You don't need to engage with it to enjoy the game, and the broad strokes of the world are explained in the main story anyways. But if you're the kind of person who likes to really dig deep into a world, Archolos more than delivers. That being said, Archolos is far from being perfect. There are a few, let's call them design quirks, that didn't so much break my immersion as they made me genuinely wonder why the devs made them. For instance, Gothic has a very unique combat system where you don't instantly kill your opponents, rather knock them unconscious. This applies to all NPCs except outright hostile enemies like bandits and orcs. When you knock them unconscious, you had the option to execute them with a finishing move, with grave consequences if you chose to go down that route. This added an extra layer of immersion and decision making because, realistically speaking, you don't want to kill absolutely everyone. Maybe you don't want to kill the baker that caught you rummaging through his cupboard. Maybe you just want to teach the tavern bully a lesson. The knockout versus kill mechanic is not super important in the grand scheme of things, but it's one of the things that makes Gothic special and adds a flavor to your role-playing decisions. Well, imagine my surprise when I found out that in Archolos, Marvin outright refuses to execute some NPCs. I would have understood if it was for story essential NPCs, but I saw Marvin doing this to D-tier random city goons that make one appearance and then disappear from the game. Then there's how arbitrarily the game decides which NPCs are knockoutable and fully hostile. Later in the story, when certain events transpire and the city is on a knife's edge, you'll occasionally get ambushed by beggars and desperate refugees. Since they're flagged as hostile, you have no option but to kill them. So I can't kill a thug that got the jump on me in an alleyway, but poor people are fair game? I don't think I need to explain why killing beggars and refugees gives me the ick. It's so bizarre, man. The next issue has to do with player agency more generally. Doors that can be opened for story reasons, invisible walls, the game teleports you back to your previous location if you deviate from the assigned quest route, but this is small beans compared to the instant cutscene deaths. That's right, there are certain moments where if you choose the wrong dialogue option or go wandering about in places you shouldn't, the game will play a non-skippable cutscene where you're instantly killed. Look, I know why these instant deaths exist. I understand the concept of fucking around and finding out. I wouldn't have reached the ripe old age of 33 had I not known that sometimes you need to keep your trap shut. Fuck up once and lose 2 teeth and all that shit. I genuinely appreciate and respect Archolos for this bold decision. Selectively restricting player choice can really make for some powerful story moments, but by gods, at least give me a fighting chance, or the chance to run. Now, to be fair, the instant deaths are used sparingly and they don't appear often enough to become an annoyance. The actual reason why they're so jarring is that they kinda go against the 2 tenets of Gothic, namely immersion and agency. Still, despite my bitching, I have to clarify that Archolos does an absolutely incredible job in terms of immersion and world building. The things that it does right more than make up for the instant deaths and the arbitrary knockout/kill system. Alright, let's move on to the gameplay mechanics.
Spróbuj mnie złapać, frajerze!
Mechanically speaking, Archolos is, again, almost identical to Gothic 2. There's the trainer-based progression system where you upgrade your skills and unlock new ones by spending learning points at trainers. The fact that as Marvin becomes more proficient with a weapon and or fighting style, his progression in skill is reflected in new animations and increasingly powerful combos. The best armor sets are locked behind faction quests, most of which are intertwined to varying degrees with the main story. To be completely honest with you, Archolos is so mechanically similar to Gothic 2 that talking about the mechanics would just be me repeating the same talking points from my Gothic 1 and 2 and even Drova videos. So I'm just gonna do a quick rundown of the basic mechanics for the people who haven't played the Gothic games and then focus on the tweaks Archolos brought to the formula. Okay? Okay, so progression. When you level up, your hit points increase and you get 10 skill points. You can invest these learning points into upgrading stats such as strength and dexterity, weapon proficiency, one-handed or two-handed weapons, and unlocking progressively higher tiers of skills such as lockpicking, pickpocketing, blacksmithing, bow making, and trophies. Now, you don't need to unlock every skill to have a smooth time. Some skills like trophies and lockpicking are more useful than others. For instance, I've always found pickpocketing more hassle than it's worth, so I limited myself to more indirect object reallocation tactics, like picking chests. Similar to Gothic, enemies don't scale with your level. A golem, for example, will be just as powerful in the end game as it was when you started the game. The difference between opening golem and endgame golem lies in your ability to deal with it. See, Marvin's expertise being reflected in new combat animations is not just window dressing. As you improve your one-handed or two-handed weapon skill, you'll gain the ability to dish out increasingly powerful combos and critical hits, the latter being your bread and butter when it comes to dealing damage. This system, together with non-scaling mobs, allows for a more, let's call it, diegetic way of gating content. Technically, the entire map is open to exploration from the beginning. In reality, you'll stumble upon lots of mobs that are way above your pay grade. This is basically the game's way of telling you to retreat and revisit the area when you're powerful enough to deal with the golem guarding the mountain mountain pass or the pack of wargs creeping around that cave that you so desperately want to explore. I mean, you could technically slay them even at level 1, but why would you? It would take a million years. So you retreat, do some questing, level up, upgrade your abilities, slay the golem and the wargs, and then you encounter another obstacle above your pay grade, and on until you become a killing machine and not even the mightiest of trolls stands a chance against you. The sense of progression from squishy rags wearing branch wielding peasant to legendary monster slayer is frankly unparalleled. It's why these games are so beloved even today. But there's a long road between prey and predator. These games are hard and you'll die a lot. Like, a lot. You will quick save and quick load approximately 1 million times throughout your run. You'll get chewed and spit out, but no matter how much shit the game gives you, you'll pick yourself up and push a little further than last time. You buy your first sword, you purchase your first set of armor, you train your muscles and refine your fighting technique. You get better, bit by bit, until suddenly you're the top dog. That's basically the gameplay loop in a nutshell, both in Gothic and Archolos. However, the main difference between Gothic and Archolos is the lengths the Archolos team went to improve and deepen that familiar gameplay loop. Let's use hunting as a starting point. In Gothic 1 and 2, hunting was just one of several money-making activities. It's still the same in Archolos, but now you have trainers specialized in the extraction of specific resources and who only buy specific trophies. Like, you'll have a hunter that will teach you how to remove wings and poisonous glands from bloodflies, turtle shells from mud turtles, hides from wolves and wargs, or shadow beast horns, another that specializes in the extraction of hearts from magical beings, and so on. This not only gives the player a reason to seek out these trainers, but also supports the beast variations introduced by Archolos. But what do you do with the resources extracted from these beasts? Well, you can smith weapons and upgrade your armor. Some of the most powerful weapons in the game can only be obtained through blacksmithing, but to smith them, you need to become an apprentice and reach the required mastery level. But hey, I hear you calling from the back of the room as I'm shitting myself because I suck at public speaking. Did you just say you can upgrade your armor? Why yes, my imaginary friend, you can. Not only is gear no longer locked behind faction progression, there's also a shit ton of upgradable armor sets to choose from. More on the factions later. Another way Archolos freshens up the Gothic formula is through enemy placement and world design in general. The increase in size and detail means that monsters blend better in the environment and there are more opportunities to get ambushed. For example, there's a cave between Selbach and Martha's Vineyard that is infested with goblin skeletons. The game sorta lulls you into a false sense of security by placing these relatively easy mobs at the cave's entrance, only to then throw a group of actual skeletons at you once you turn a right to explore the rest of the cave. Not 10 feet away from the cursed cave, you'll find a brown bear chilling in the woods. I managed to kill the bear by luring it to a tree stump. Unfortunately, I got cocky and got myself mauled by a shadow beast hanging around close to the bear's original position. The point is that Archolos, through clever enemy placement and level design, forced me to sort of reframe how I approached the game. It forced me to think beyond just pumping up my strength stat and brute forcing its challenges and using every tool that the game put at my disposal. And once I did that, it's like a switch flipped in my brain and a whole universe of mechanics and creative solutions revealed itself to me. I started seeking out bestiaries and learning monster strengths and weaknesses. I started buying recipes and cooking foods to get bonuses for specific situations. This was literally the first time I ever took a cooking system in a game seriously. It's that useful. I started memorizing which merchant specializes in what products so that I could manage my finances more efficiently and fund subsequent expeditions. Selling pastries to bakers, meat to butchers, pelts to hunters, weapons to blacksmiths, dishes to the Selbach cook, and so on. I began relying less on maps, which have to be purchased in this game too by the way, and more on signposts. If I found a cave with sleeping shadow beasts that I was too weak to defeat directly, I would just sneak past them, grab whatever loot I could find, and get the fuck out. I read every single item description and made sure to keep one of each item just in case I would need it for a quest or a random encounter. I bought all the maps I could get my hands on and completed most of the treasure hunts, another thing that I literally never did in a video game. I sought out all the trainers specialized in extraction so that I could max out the amount of resources resources I extracted from mines and trees. What I couldn't afford to buy, I stole and sold at a premium. And I don't mean I just snatched an apple from a cupboard or something. I robbed the entire village of Silbach and most of the city of Archolos. And yes, eating apples still raises your strength. In fact, eating all kinds of foods raises a variety of stats if consumed in specific quantities. I became so absorbed in the moment-to-moment stuff that raising my combat proficiency became kind of a bonus. Like, don't get me wrong, one-hitting wargs after spending 50 hours of playtime shitting my pants at the mere sight of them felt good, but you know what really perked me up? Becoming a master alchemist way earlier than intended, in chapter 2 by the way, chugging 5 consecutive strength potions and finally equipping the weapon that had been gathering dust in my inventory for the last 20 hours. Speaking of which, remember how in Gothic 2 Night of the Raven you were supposed to save permanent stat potions, say strength elixirs, for later in the game when training strength with learning points became too expensive, like 4 or 5 learning points for 1 strength expensive? That's no longer the case. That said, let's move on to the final stretch of the video and talk about the factions and questing.
Tu mają piwo?
In terms of factions, Archolos features only 2 joinable factions instead of the usual 3, those being Old Camp, New Camp and the Set Camp in Gothic, and the Paladins, Mercenaries and Mages in Gothic 2. Now, it's worth mentioning that this break from the established formula didn't affect me as much as other fans of the series. Unless the game is specifically about being a mage, I never play as a spellcaster. Give me a longsword and a chainmail armor and I'm good to go. The same thing applies to Gothic. I never joined the Set Camp or the Mages Guild, and my only contact with these factions consisted of hearing friends telling me how much I'm missing out by not doing so. So, now that I think about it, Archolos' 2-faction approach didn't affect me like at all. Thing is, the 2 factions in Gothic are differentiated enough in terms of story, quests, playstyles, and replay value that most people will be fine with the exclusion of a magic themed faction. There is magic in the game of course, but it's more of a unlock spells by finding books and runes in the wild kind of thing. You can't make a full magic build in Archolos the way you could in Gothic. Again, not my thing, doesn't affect me at all, just something to keep in mind if you care about this sort of thing. Anyways, the 2 joinable factions in Archolos are the City Guard and the Araxos Merchants Guild. Basically, your choice in faction boils down to becoming a cop or joining the armed wing of a turbo-capitalist organization as what is commonly known as a mercenary. Not that they'd call themselves mercenaries, of course, they're just, you know, highly trained fighters who sell their swords to the highest bidder. Oh, yes, that's it, they're sell swords, not mercenaries. Sell swords. Much better. Now, as much as I love Gothic 2, the Paladins and the Mercenaries have always felt a little underdeveloped to me, at least compared to the factions featured in the original Gothic. I don't know about you, but a faction composed of ex-convicts who killed the guards and took their place, a group that wants to blow a hole in the magical barrier surrounding the prison colony by exploding a huge pile of ore, or a bunch of stoners that worship a god that may or may not be Lovecraftian in nature, feels infinitely more interesting than dudes in heavy armor and dudes in light armor. Therefore, I was happy to see that the factions featured in Archolos are not only on par with the ones in Gothic, but also contain a wide cast of characters with interesting backstories and motivations. It also helps that Marvin finds these factions at a historical turning point, each facing their own set of unique challenges that could threaten their very existence. The City Guard, for example, is a shadow of its former self, in such a bad state that the citizens of Archolos barely take them seriously anymore. In its heyday, the City Guard was divided into specialized divisions of swordsmen and crossbowmen, but that tradition was gradually abandoned due to poor funding and institutional decay that resulted in a lack of senior officers to train recruits. What's worse, prospects have to secure weapons out of their own pockets in order to be accepted in the City Guard. This is sold as testing their resourcefulness and street smarts, but in reality, the City Guard is obviously severely underfunded and under-equipped since all the good blades produced in the city are sent directly to the front. Then there's the fact that the living conditions in the barracks are awful, the food is barely edible, and the pay is barely enough for 1 beer a day. 1 beer a day! The Archolos guild, the one I ended up joining, is in a better shape than the city guard, but only barely. You'd think a merchants guild would be in the best position to profit off a war, but unfortunately for them, this war is of an existential nature since the orcs want nothing less than the total subjugation of humanity. Also, the fact that the king has confiscated the guild's ships certainly doesn't help. Now, the reason why I joined the merchants guild over the guard was to find out whether the game explores the economic and political implications, for the lack of a better expression, of an economy entirely dominated by a guild. And I was not disappointed. The game goes into excruciating detail. It world builds the absolute fuck out of the merchants guild. Since I've already covered this stuff in a previous section, I'll just highlight one of my favorite details. So, to help new players navigate the gargantuan city of Archolos, the devs implemented a guide system. For a symbolic sum, you can hire a guide to escort you to any major landmark in the city. What's this have to do with the merchants guild? Well, guess who runs the guide program? That's not its only purpose though. Runners, as they're called, are also tasked with running messages, transporting goods, and executing various initiatives meant to spread the guild's soft power throughout the island. It's basically a delivery slash guiding service and PR campaign wrapped in one package. After all, it's no coincidence that the merchants guild has senior members hanging around the gates specifically to welcome newcomers and preach the guild's greatness and massive contribution to the island's economy. So that's the factions in terms of story and world building, but how do they work in practice? Well, the first thing you need to know is that you can do all faction quests before committing to one. In fact, it's highly recommended you do so, not only for the XP gains, but also the additional narrative context you get. A small detail that I haven't seen mentioned in other videos is how Marvin's demeanor changes depending on the faction. For example, notice the cop personality that Marvin suddenly develops while on patrol with the city guard.
Ze strażą. Patrolujemy miasto, czyli innymi słowy szukamy ludzi.
W takim razie nie będę wam.
Nie?
Nie, gdzieżby? Widzicie kogoś, kto robi...
Mógłbym zobaczyć, co tam czytasz?
Co? Ale to są jakieś...
Myślę, że ocenię to sam. Nalegam.
Ale to tylko romansidło zwykłe. Po prostu czasami lubię się zorientować.
Całe dzieło na jednej kartce papieru? Nawet jak na romansidło to trochę mało. Proszę mi to dać.
That said, the effects of choosing a faction go beyond simple dialogue flavor. Each faction has an initiation quest, a main quest line, an additional loyalty quest line that you need to complete in order to join one of two specialized divisions, and several other main and side quests that serve as connective tissue between those three phases. I hope I got that sequence right. There's a lot of faction quests, okay? Quests during which you'll make choices that will affect even the main quest in ways that you'll not anticipate. This alone lends Archolos a lot of replay value because some events will play out differently depending on the variation of lesser evil you choose. And that's pretty much all the information I can share about the factions without going into spoiler territory. Finally, let's tackle pacing and questing in one big pile. First of all, let me just say that this game has a metric ton of quests. Over 120 to be precise. Now, that number may seem daunting, but trust me when I say that you'll barely feel it, as the game does a great job of subtly funneling you through the game's intricate web of quests. Structurally speaking, Archolos follows the Gothic recipe to a T. You start the game in a small settlement that serves as an unofficial tutorial hub and microcosm of everything the game has to offer. In Archolos' case, it's the village of Silbach. After several hours, and by several hours I mean anything between 10 and 30, of doing odd jobs and running errands for the villagers, the village elder grants you a permit to enter the city of Archolos. Once inside the city of Archolos, you come into contact with the factions. But before joining the factions, you need to become a citizen. But to become a citizen, you must obtain letters of recommendation from city masters in chapter 1. But to obtain letters of recommendation from city masters, they'll obviously want something in exchange. The legality and morality of that something depending on the quest giver in question. With the citizenship and faction membership secured, you can finally focus on moving up in the world, aka getting a promotion in your chosen faction and well, finding your brother, I guess. Now, technically speaking, you can absolutely fuck around and stretch that sequence of quests for longer than the devs intended. However, at some point you will have to lock in and follow the main progression route. As much as Archolos has expanded the gameplay options for non-affiliated players, you have to join a faction in order to access higher tier gear and unlock city perks. Additionally, independent trainers can teach you only to a certain level, and the best trainers in the game deal only with members of their respective factions. Finally, you need to complete specific main story beats to unlock additional side quests. As much as I want to tell you that you can stretch your smoking hookah in taverns and doing odd jobs for passive-aggressive villagers phase indefinitely, at some point you'll have to work towards improving Marvin's lot. It's an adventure after all. And boy, what an adventure it is. Archolos has some of the best selection of RPG side quests I've seen in my life. To say that they do a great job of selling Archolos as an official entry in the Gothic universe, even though it technically isn't, would be an understatement. There's something for everybody here, from dramatic, superbly written stories that explore the island's social and political complexities, to sillier ones, like the quest where you have to teach a landowner's slacker son to apply himself. Archolos also features a fair number of quests that revolve around a specific theme or gimmick, but not in the negative sense. Take the quest that you receive from this shockingly affable and reasonable loan shark. Loan collection quests are nothing new in RPGs. However, this trope is somewhat subverted here by the fact that you're sent on this collection run because she doesn't want to loan money to strangers. We also get a juicy bit of backstory when she tells us that out of respect, she's obligated to refer any loan request exceeding a certain sum to Volker, the city's crime boss. There's one small quest that involves repairing a net for a fisherman. Problem is, the only certified fishnet technician from the village is busy and won't take your request, not even for money. So you strike a bargain with him. He'll fix your net in exchange for a good story. But here's the twist. If the story doesn't make sense, he'll just stop and you fail the quest. If I were one of those YouTubers, I'd make up some bullshit about this quest being some sort of meta commentary on the plight of developing video games in the year of our Lord 2026. But it's not, it's just a silly little quest about a bored fisherman. Or is it? I don't know, man. I could go on, but there's just too many high quality quests to name in a single video, so I'll just stop here. Actually, no, I won't. Fuck you. This is my video. I'll do whatever I want. So remember when I said you must obtain letters of recommendation from city masters to become a citizen? One of those masters is the brewer. It's one of my favorite quest lines in the game. The quest involves marketing his brand new beer to other inns around the city by appealing to the specific tastes of the innkeepers and their clientele. For example, Marvin tells the owner of an upscale inn that this is not just any piss poor beer. It has to be drunk in slow, small sips due to its potency, and more importantly, it can be aged like wine. Selling the beer to the guard is a whole different story for obvious reasons. So Marvin is like, guards are people too, and I know for a fact that they're growing bored drinking the same basic beer. How about giving them something stronger that can be rationed out? And on top of that, also tastes good. Plus, you'd rather your men didn't wander around the inns, right? It's better that they drink it in the safety of the barracks and not cause trouble. Right? Lorenzo, the Merchants Guild representative, is impressed by the beer, but the guild already has a contract signed with Ernesto, a local winemaker. So he makes a proposition. Plant a bottle of piss poor liquor with Ernesto's label on it on one of the merchants, so that he has an excuse to void the contract once word spreads around that Ernesto has been cutting corners with his product. And that's the quest. So what's so special about it? Well, for one, it puts you into contact with the major power players in the city. Secondly, you get so much interesting information about the world organically just by talking to these people. Before going on your marketing run, the brewer gives you a tour of his laboratory, and let me tell you, this dude knows his shit. He explains how the beer is produced, how he sources the raw ingredients, the origin of its name, what differentiates this beer from the competition, and why he's sure it will sell gangbusters even though Archolos is a wine city. It's almost as if he's trying to sell it to you. He may be in a position of power over you and he knows you need that recommendation, but he's smart enough to realize that he has to sell this product to you first before you go on to market it on his behalf. He doesn't see you as some random refugee, but as a potential partner. He's dead as one of the few people in this entire fucking game that shows you this level of respect. Not to mention that it's really endearing seeing someone so passionate about their craft. I could listen to this guy all day, independent of the fact that I'm a huge beer lover. Anyways, this quest marked the moment when I was 100% sold on Archolos. It's such a great showcase of Archolos' stellar writing and world building, and again, there are too many quests to list in a single video, but I hope this one is enough to convince you. Whew, and that's pretty much it for this video. What can I say? Archolos is a fucking triumph. It's so good that it may have ruined the original Gothic games for me forever, even though I'm sure that this wasn't the developer's intention. I I will be revisiting the old Gothic games, but not too soon since the mod of the Decade edition of Archolos might be just around the corner. Can't wait to boot it up to see what they cooked. Thanks for watching. As always, a special thank you to my wonderful patrons whose generosity makes these videos possible. I'll see you next time.